first subject I'd just like to kick around with you, big data. This is the one I run into wherever I go. It is, in my view, the biggest both obstacle and opportunity for just about anybody in the marketing and consumer research world. And in fact, today I would refer to it mostly as a significant problem. It's confusing. It represents the most diverse, wide-ranging interests you could ever imagine. Most people who bring big data to the table all have a self-serving interest in how to use it in some way, shape, or form. And so if you are a user, you're trying to reach a population or understand an insight with a population, you have to dissect all of those things. Like, what is the underlying interest of the party who's bringing the data to me? And why do they want it this way? And how does it relate to the 5 things next door, right? Just stop and think about Facebook's interests, Google's interests, Microsoft's interests, Apple's interests, and think about Amazon's interests, and think about the data that they have, the notion that if you could put all that data together, you can solve the world's problems. That's all true. The problem is you can't do it. And you can't live with the same kind of functional deployment the world lives with today, right? You got a little marketing insights group that's in and of themselves in one place. You got a marketing and advertising crowd that's in another place that doesn't really talk to them. You've got a distribution crowd that wants to be as the most efficient distributor to every form of retail, wants to fight with every retailer about sort of how efficient they can be and where their placement ought to be on the shelf. All of these steps in the demand chain end up being disjointed. Every step in the process is a compromise. Everything about that process reminds me of the early days of the supply chain. There is no such thing as cycle time. How long it takes to process an idea and actually turn it into a product and deliver it to exactly the consumer you want to deliver it to. Advertising. Most people think about it as paid. What is paid? I pay you to run an ad on the service that you created. Almost everybody thinks about it that way. It turns out the real big shift going on in terms of consumer influence is actually in this area, which is all the conversations you have in the social world. And the notion that something a company did, some idea that prospered, they promoted, whatever, got your attention. And you created the media. You created the advertisement by virtue of the discussions you had virtually. And that notion of earned media is a very powerful notion. If you get it right, you pay nothing for it, and your market explodes. The only other comment I would make is the agency dependency. Almost all CMOs are, because first of all, they start with that notion of campaign. They become incredibly dependent on agencies. Because the agencies, for the most part, have fed that all the campaign ideas. They're really good at the work they do. I actually love the creative side of agency. I think there's always a big place for it. It's just that you can't become completely dependent on it, right? If you're a CMO, you're going to have to mix it up, find lots of agencies to support you in every way you can, and also understand that there are a lot of changes going on that agencies have to deal with. And most of it relates to earned media and the social world, because they don't make a penny on that one. And if they feed it and it works, they lose. It's real simple. And so that whole notion of how to think about that dynamic is important. That's what you do. That's where all the big advertising money is. I want all that. And I said to the show, I said, you know, I beg to differ. I think there's a very different way of thinking about this. The biggest dynamic going on in the TV world is the number of people that are on Facebook at the same time. That's the dynamic. I said, you have a relationship with TV. I'm not sure you understand it or how to think about it. But if you get bold about it and begin to sell your relationship with TV in addition to just the raw power of display ads, you now have a sort of a double value game, right? And they play that hard now. And it's just that's what's going on, right? It's never one medium by itself, ever. It never is. It's always the combination. It's always the great marketer knows how to play them together.